Hey guys, Dave with First Place Auto Parts. Welcome to my shop, and today we're going to talk about what you need in your shop should you want to start working on your classic vehicle. Look, classic cars and trucks are really cool. They were made in a time when things were a little simpler and you can actually work on them at your home. So if you're interested in getting started, there are a couple of things that you should have in your shop or your garage that'll make this whole process a little bit easier, because what you're going to find is once you start working on your car or truck, you're going to continually want to do stuff to it. And once you gain the confidence in your abilities, you're going to want to start to accumulate the tools. There's an old saying that the right tool makes any job easy, and it's very true. There's also going to be another phrase you're going to continually hear through this process, and that is bigger is better or more is better. So I'll explain that as we get further into the video, but let's go ahead and get started and find out what you need in your shop to start working on your vehicles. Hey guys, if you enjoyed today's video or found it informative, please consider subscribing to the First Place Auto Parts YouTube channel. There we will continually add videos every week where we either identify the parts you need for your car, we show you how to install them, or we go to some pretty cool car guy events that I think you're going to want to see. I've been building or working on American muscle cars and trucks for over 30 years. I've worked in the automotive aftermarket with manufacturers and retailers alike for over 25 years. Over that time, I've accumulated pretty much everything that I need to work on anything with a car, excluding paint. Look, I don't have a paint booth, but everything else I can do here in my shop, I've accumulated over the years. So understand that this list is by no means complete, but it's going to be the basics that you need to set yourself up for, I don't want to say a career, but the experience of owning a classic vehicle. Look, the reality is we typically buy and sell these things. We get it done and we go on to the next one. So these tools, think of these things as investments, and not only time but also money. The tools you have now, you will use again at some point in the near future on something else. It might be your daily driver, but either way, these tools are something that every garage should have if you decide you're going to want to work on your own equipment. The first thing that every shop should have is a toolbox, and one that's big enough for not only the tools you have now, but the tools you're going to accumulate later. Toolboxes come in a lot of different shapes, sizes, and colors. Whatever toolbox you decide to get, make sure you get one that's big enough not only for your tools today, but for the tools you own tomorrow. As you work on your car, you will start to accumulate more and more tools, and you're going to need a good place to put them. Large shelves are good for items such as fuel pumps and larger items that might take up more space. And then large pull-out shelves are wonderful for large crescent wrenches, breaker bars, and timing lights. So be thinking ahead of the game. Don't get a toolbox that's too small, and get one that fits what your garage needs. Like I said, some of them can fit on top of your workbench, while others can fit under your workbench, and then still you have the larger roll-around type that I have that you can move around to the car when you're working on it. And the next thing is to have enough work surface area to tackle the projects that you want to take on. Some of the projects you're going to do on your car, when you take this piece or this part off of a vehicle, you're going to start breaking it down, and it's going to have a lot of pieces associated with it. You're going to want to stage those pieces in a strategically placed area where you won't disturb them as you're working on the core piece. So it's critical to have enough workbench surface area and to have one that's sturdy enough that you can use for heavy objects. You can also have something like this, which is a welding table. It's a table from a welding shop. It has a steel top, lots of storage underneath, that I mounted on some pretty heavy-duty casters that I can roll around. So if your space is limited, don't overlook a freestanding cabinet to be able to use as a workbench. If you have to move this thing around to pull a car in at night or whatever it might be, you can do that. You can either have a permanently mounted workbench to your wall, takes up a little bit more space that way, or you can have something that moves around on casters. But either way, make sure you get something that's big enough. There's nothing worse than trying to do a project when the part you're working on is continuously falling off the edge, or your tools are falling off the edge. Think of it like your dinner plate. You put your meat and your potatoes and you want to put some peas on there, but you keep adding more to it and it keeps pushing the peas off the plate. You don't want that when you're working on your car. Get a big enough work surface and one with a top on it that will actually take a beating. The next piece of equipment for your shop that you are absolutely going to need, and it's going to mount to that work surface we just talked about, is a good sturdy vise. Now, a vise is something that it's better to have too much vise than not enough. Look, if you don't have a press, you can use a vise for a lot of stuff, such as installing U-joints on a drive shaft if you're careful. the best thing I can tell you is that some of the older vices were actually kind of a little bit better than the newer vices. You can find older vices at either swap meets or even pawn shops. Get an automotive or an industrial type vise. Get one that opens up at least 3 or 4 inches. Get one that's heavy and sturdy and has an adjustable base so that if you need to come at a piece of equipment or what you're working on in a different angle, you can rotate that thing around. But either way, spend a little bit more money up front. Get the vise you not only need today, but for the ones you're going to need for tomorrow's projects as well. Eventually, you're going to want to get underneath your vehicle, maybe to remove the wheels, maybe to work on the brakes, or perhaps to get it up a little bit higher so that you can do something more major like a transmission or rear end. So the next thing we're going to talk about is a jack. In every garage, heck, every home should have a jack, okay? Jacks, essentially, they come in 2 different flavors, and that's really going to have to do with their chassis. There's going to be a standard chassis, which is probably what you're familiar with, and then there's what's called a low-profile chassis. A lot of cars, especially your pro touring type cars, have been lowered down and are on 20 or 22 inch wheels. Don't leave a lot of room to get a jack up underneath. So these low profile chassis are very good and almost essential when it comes time to working on lowered vehicles. Make sure that you get something that's at a minimum a 3-ton jack. Anything below 3 tons to 2.5-ton jacks, they have such a small chassis and a small spacing on their wheels, they become a little unstable. So a 3-ton jack I would consider to be really that sweet spot for working on classic vehicles and classic trucks. And don't buy cheap when it comes to jacks. Buy the best one you can get. And also, don't leave your jack outside. The elements are not kind to the lift cylinder in the jack. The wheels are typically steel. So you want those wheels to roll smoothly. You don't want to be a lot of rust. But keep your jack inside and buy a good jack. Don't look for a deal on jacks. Nothing wrong with finding a deal on jacks. Just don't make that your prime determinant. And along with the jack, now that you got your vehicle up in the air, comes the jack stands. And jack stands are something that are a safety device as well. Do not ever be tempted to work underneath a vehicle that's supported by a jack only. Look, I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm doing underneath a vehicle, but I have had a jack fail before, and I can tell you that the vehicle comes down with such speed that there's no way if you were underneath it, you would ever be able to get out from underneath that vehicle. In my case, I was getting ready to slide the jack stands underneath the front control arms on my truck, my daily driver, and I had a seal blow on my lift cylinder on my jack. So please do not ever be tempted to work under a vehicle supported only by a jack. So get your jack stands. The bigger the better, the sturdier the better. Like I said, 3 tons would be the minimum I would even consider for working on a classic vehicle or a classic truck. And get 4 of them, because there's going to be a time when you're going to want to get that vehicle off the ground, both the front and the rear end. And if you don't have a lift, a jack and a jack stands are going to be the only way. I have been building cars and working in cars for 30 years. I have never personally owned a lift. While I would have loved to have a lift, typically there was always something, whether it was my ceiling height that kept me from having it, or I didn't have 220 or whatever it would be. But I've made do, and I've done a lot of crazy stuff. And by crazy, I mean there isn't anything that I haven't done on a car that I haven't been able to do on a jack and jack stand. So it may not be as convenient, but if you're going to have a jack, you've got to have the jack stands to go with it in your garage. And the last piece of shop equipment that every garage needs is an air compressor. Look, it doesn't matter what size you buy, whether it's a pancake type that you see at a construction site, the lay-down type that you can pull with a handle, or a stand-up air compressor that you mount semi-permanently in your shop. An air compressor is the jack of all trades when it comes to your shop. It can run air tools. You can use it to blow up tires. You can use it to spray paint with. You can use it for so many different things that every shop, every garage should have an air compressor. Now, this is one place where I'm going to tell you that bigger is better. Get the biggest air compressor that you can afford, because the recovery rate is largely dictated by the amount of capacity that the air tank has, and also the size of the pump and the motor and things of that nature. But I've never gone wrong with having too big of an air compressor for my shop. And again, it's made all the difference in the world. It either speeds up what I'm working on in regards to the removal process and the reassembly when I'm using my air tools, or it makes it easy just to service my own tires in my shop to make sure as the temperature changes that I have enough air in my tires. So I'm using the air gun to blow things off and blow things clean like my chainsaw. So an air compressor is something that every shop should have. And it's something that you have a lot of options. So make sure that you get one that fits your needs, but also be thinking again to the future, your future needs as well, because used air compressors, while you can sell them, always seem to be a little more difficult to get rid of. I would rather have too big of an air compressor and then grow into it than to buy one that's too small to try to get rid of it and spend more money to get what I really wanted or needed later on down the road. So get yourself an air compressor and be pleasantly surprised with how much you use that thing. Okay guys, that's what I consider to be the key pieces that every shop or garage should have. Look, all that stuff that we just mentioned is either going to make the job working on your car either better, safer, or more efficient. It's going to end up being a better finished product because you have those tools in your shop. It's always better to have them than want them, and usually it's much safer to have them than need them. So make sure that you go ahead and get the best stuff you can get. Buy a little bigger than you think you might need, because someday you'll grow into it. And also, make sure that you buy the best quality of the product that you can find as well. It'll pay dividends for a long time. You'll have this equipment forever, perhaps, in some cases. I've had some of this stuff for 30 plus years, and it still works great. I appreciate you guys following along and watching this video. And until next time, keep the hammer down and keep it between the guardrails.